This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net. This is Your Purpose, Your Power, a Journey to Authenticity. Welcome to a collaborative podcast series brought to you by NewClevelandRadio.net and Cleveland 13 News. I'm your host, Karen Hale, and I'm honored to share space with extraordinary individuals from Cleveland and beyond who've discovered their purpose and the power to live it out fully while lifting others along the way. Over the past 13 years, podcasting has been more than a career. It's been a path to reclaiming my own authenticity. Before that first recording, I spent years chasing an image of who I thought I should be. But the moment I introduced my first guest, something shifted. I found my voice and, more importantly, my purpose. This series is about meaningful connections, mutual growth, and the beauty of learning from each other's stories. I'm so glad you're here. So let's meet today's guest. My guest today actually found me in New Cleveland Radio at the local Chinese restaurant. Yes, I had a stack of business cards there. And next thing I know, Paul Seaburn gave me a call and said, well, what's this all about? NewClevelandRadio.net. And we met, and that's how his podcast, What in the World, has been on our network now for almost 7 years. Can you believe we've known each other for 7 years? I mean, look, we both have white hair. But what is exciting about Paul is that when I learned more about him, he's a local community guy. He grew up in Parma, went to parochial school, went to John Carroll University. You were probably one of the pioneers in information technology, because back in the 60s and 70s, there weren't that many of us taking courses in information technology.
That's exactly right, Karen. Thanks for that great introduction. 7 years, that's amazing. And that's a true story. That really is the whole Chinese restaurant. That's so funny. And we didn't know what in the world was going to evolve into way back then, and it's turned into quite a fun experience. But yeah, you're right. Long before I was I was certainly as a writer or in the comedy business. I was in the computer business, and that is tied directly to growing up in Parma, Ohio. Believe it or not, I did. Was born and raised in Parma. Went to St. Francis de Sales grade school, a good Catholic school, raised by nuns. And I had good experiences with nuns before anybody gets the wrong idea. That was a lot of fun. Went to Padua Franciscan High School. It had just opened up a few years before, and it was an interesting experience. That was back in the days when most of the college, high schools were not co-ed, so it was an all-boys school back then, and I was good at math, so I gravitated into algebra and geometry and all those. And one of the classes that was offered by the math department, when the first computer class in the city of Cleveland, first high school computer class, may have even been the first college, I don't know, but the teacher's name, I still remember his name, Mr. Corsica. In fact, he's still alive. He's down in Florida. I converse with him regularly. And I learned Fortran, an ancient language, kind of like Arabic or something, some language that no one uses anymore. But it was an eye-opening experience. I enjoyed it. I got good grades. That's the most important part. And Mr. Corsica and that class helped me decide that I wanted to go to school at John Carroll University in Cleveland. For a couple of reasons. One, because Mr. Corsica went to school there. Second, they had a computer. They had some computer classes, and they had a good math program. So, and again, as you said, Karen, That was in the 60s. That was before, that was the punch card era. That was
Yep.
the reel-to-reel tapes, that you see in those black and white movies that your parents or grandparents watch. Um, so it was really getting in on the ground floor with computers, and had a wonderful experience at John Carroll. Majored in math, minored in philosophy of all things. Not really at the time. I didn't realize that those two would come together and influence my career and my life in many different ways. So we'll try and get back to that. Um, so I took some more, as many computer classes as I could at John Carroll. Graduated with a degree in math, and uh, it went to work as a programmer. I don't know what they even call programmers these days, but I wrote programs for those big mainframes that you see, and what wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Answered an ad for a systems analyst because I thought that sounded more impressive than programmer. Applied for the job and got it. And what it was at that time, I was working for an up and coming, I didn't realize it at the time, a very fast growing up and coming computer company by the name of Sycor. Sycor was based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they made disk drives, which was a new thing at the time for small computers. They were one of the first to make these things, and they were looking for techies to help explain it, this whole concept of small computers and terminals and things like that to customers. So I was good on my feet, besides being um, technologically experienced, at least from school. So that got me into working for what we call a computer vendor, and a lot of fun. I had a chance to. It was a fast growing company, so I quickly moved to Columbus, Ohio. Then I moved to the headquarters in Ann Arbor. They were going to move me to Minnesota, which was a company that had acquired us, and their headquarters was in Minneapolis. And I spent 3 months there, and it was colder than Cleveland. I couldn't believe that there's a place colder than Cleveland, but
Absolutely.
Minnesota is. Yeah. So I finagled a way to get back to Cleveland, and again, reading the want ads back in the old days, reading through the want ads because I'm always look. This is a guiding light through my many careers. I'm always looking for more work, but I'm always looking at what's available. What are other people doing? Um, you know, it, Usually it's more to um, learn about the business, learn about maybe some things that I should be doing in my own job, not necessarily to change jobs. But at that time, that's what I was going to do, and responded to an ad for a company called Tandem, like the bicycle built for two. And I didn't know it at the time. Tandem was a really, really fast growing, brand new company that made the computers that now run, or at that time were running credit card processing and point of sale authorizations, check uh, uh, cash registers and things like that. The quit. So so I got the job there. Turned out that I knew a lot of the people who were working for the company. They had worked at my previous company, and just the most fun, very progressive people. Took care of their employees. Uh, this was back before you got into the computer business to become a millionaire or a
Yep.
billionaire. We got in because we wanted to build something new. That was what we wanted to do. And there were hundreds of computer companies at that time. And we knew each other. We competed with each other. We were friends with each other. We worked we would swap jobs. And it was just a fun time to be in the computer industry. The That gave me the opportunity to move to Houston, Texas. I became the district technical manager for Tandem down in Texas. And what a, I hated we hated leaving. My wife and I hated leaving Cleveland because that's we both grew up in Parma again. But in fact, she went to the same grade school as I did and has this, a similar Catholic school education. Lots of therapy that we finally used to get over that. But it was a big move, moving from Cleveland to Texas. Um,
It's another
and
country.
yeah, it, it was then and it is today. So really again, another one of those eye-opening experiences. The only thing that was stable um, was that I was still working for the company, so I knew my job, and my wife worked for lawyers, and she got a job with a really good law firm down there. So that was the stability we needed to deal with the heat and the humidity and the hurricanes and the bugs and all the other stuff in Texans. Sorry, Texans. I I love there's a lot. I love a lot of Texans. I love Mexican food and all the good things down there, and barbecue, of course. Um, so that I saw that as the next step in my computer career. What a mistake that was, because it was not. It was we did really well. We were continuing to grow by leaps and bounds. We were the fastest company to reach $1 billion in sales in not just in computer companies, but any company. So we were very well known. We were doing so well, I thought I'd be transferred someplace else. And the company president said, no, you guys just stay there and keep doing what you're doing. We'll just keep paying you more money. So I could go for that.
Not
Uh,
bad.
yeah. So my hobby, here's where the twist comes. My hobby was comedy. I enjoyed watching sitcoms. I enjoyed funny movies. I enjoyed using humor in my presentations. That I gave an awful lot of presentations. I was an instructor. I was talking about the business, trying to sell computers. So I'm always on my feet talking, and I was always trying to use humor. A comedy club that I would frequent in Houston had a class in comedy writing. And I thought, wow, this sounds like something that could help me in my computer job. So I took the class, and what it was kind of misleading. It was a class on learning how to write 5 minutes worth of comedy. And
Oh.
then to graduate, you had to get up on stage and present it to an audience. So I say that piece of cake. So I did that, and had my first performance at a comedy club. Got some laughs, and more importantly, I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. So I took the next class, and then I started going to open mic nights. That was part during the comedy boom of the '80s,
Right.
and Houston was one of the epicenters of that comedy boom. So there were a lot of places to work out, as they say. So during the day, I'm selling computers, and at night I'm going to comedy clubs and telling jokes. Uh, well enough that I started getting booked, getting paid to do it. I was getting paid to be an opening act. So don't be impressed by that, because I made enough money in the computer business that I had a mortgage and two car payments, and kept my wife in nice clothes and all those things. Went on vacations. In the comedy business, you make enough to pay for the gasoline to get you home.
That's
Uh,
right.
not exactly a good paying job. Um, and I was fortunate enough, it's serendipity. Things happen, and you should pay attention to the things that happen. It's one of my philosophy. Pay attention when somebody says something to you, or when something happens, because it may be a sign. And one of the people I was the opening act for, Diana Jordan, uh, came to me afterwards, and she said, you're a much better writer than you are a performer. And she knew about my job. And she says, would you be interested in writing for me? And my wife is standing next to me, and she says, well, how much do you pay?
Oh,
Right off
I
the bat.
love her.
Hey, Karen, you know my wife, so you
Yes.
know that that's a very natural thing for her to say. So we came to an agreement. She was an up and coming comedian, had some money to burn, so she put me on retainer to write for her, to help her to maybe get a sitcom, all the different things that they do out in Hollywood. So I'm still working during the day. I'm going out on the weekend. I would go to visit her in Hollywood and write, meet some other people and make connections. We ended up writing a book together called A Wife's Little Instruction Book, um, Your Survival Guide to Marriage Without Bloodshed, which sounds terrible. but
But it's the truth.
yeah, that's right. It's a funny book for women, jokes about men. Um, I wrote for a lot of female comedians in addition to Diane. I worked for Joan Rivers, for example, for a while. And people would always ask me, how is it that you're able to write so well for women? And my answer is my middle name is Michael. So my initials are PMS. So I blame my mom, that's for naming me that. Uh, so anyways, I started writing for other comedians, going to comedy clubs, passing out material, meeting comics, and some of them were getting, auditioning for sitcoms like Diane. So I was working on sitcom pilots and things like that. Really exciting stuff. And right about that time, um, one of my comedian friends called me up and said, "Hey, Jay Leno, uh, top comedian at the time, is going to be taking over on Monday nights as the guest host of the Tonight Show, and he's looking for writers." Another one of those messages, and I said, "Well, okay." And he says, "You'd be good for that." So I had no idea how to contact Jay. I typed up a bunch of jokes, put them in an envelope, and mailed them to the Tonight Show. A couple weeks later, I get a phone call. "Hey, this is Jay Leno," and it was him, not one
Wow.
of my friends doing impressions. And um, he offered me a job. He said he liked my material. He gave me his fax number and a contract, and I proceeded to fax him jokes every week, monologue jokes, about the news and stuff like that. And he only had a few writers at the time. There was me, there was a guy in St. Louis, a couple of people in California. Small operation, but it was. He obviously did well because he ended up taking over for Johnny Carson 3 years later.
Right.
Yeah, so I was not in the Writers Guild. Um, I wasn't really necessarily in a position to move to Hollywood. So when he expanded his staff in Hollywood, he kept me on and with the deal that I could stay in Houston, which was really nice. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. Has given many comedians and writers a good start in the business. So I to this day I thank him for that. Uh, and so I continued to write for Jay for a number of years. Some other opportunities came up. I ended up working for a similar position for Comic Strip Live, Caroline's Comedy Hour. Um, I kept writing sitcom pilots, children's show pilots, and one of the comedians that I had established a relationship with, a guy by the name of Taylor Mason, who was not in addition to being a comedian, he's more well known as a ventriloquist. And we hit it off, and we worked on some pilots. And one day he called me up in the middle of the night. He was in Columbus, Ohio, and he said, "I got a live one. Um, we we get your sitcom, get your children's show scripts together and send them to me." And we ended up writing and producing a show called Taylor's Attic, which was a children's show on the iNet, the Inspirational Network, a Christian based television network that was looking to get into more children's programming and competing with ABC Children and Nickelodeon and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was great. It was in Columbus, Ohio. So I got to fly to Columbus, 2 hours away from Cleveland, drive up and see my family regularly. And we were doing really well. We were about to sign contracts for our third season. My wife was all excited because there had to be enough money that we could move back to Cleveland after 28, well, at that time it was about 25 years in Houston. We were ready to come back, our families were still here. My mom was still living at the time, and half the funding came through. That's what happens in Hollywood. You can't count on anything. But the seed had been planted, and we really, really were ready to move back. So we scrambled and tried other things, and I took on more jobs, more writing jobs, as much as I could. And eventually we moved back to Cleveland back in 2010. Um, I've done everything in the comedy business that you can think of. I've written greeting cards, I've written comic books, I've worked my jokes and things are in 30 different books, joke books, trivia books, picture captioning picture books. I've worked in radio, I've worked on television. And believe it or not, after all that, I moved back to Cleveland and I'm having a hard time finding more work. Oh, geez, this is not good. So it just so happened, again, one of these serendipitous moments. I was doing some side jobs for a comedy news service out of New York. Real news, like my motto on my podcast, real news, but presented in a funny way. And I was contacted by these two guys in Australia, of all places. And they said, we've seen your stuff. We like what you're doing. We'd be interested in hiring you. But we have a little bit of a twist to the news. Instead of regular news, we want you to write about UFOs and Bigfoot and ghost and paranormal kind of stuff, Loch Ness Monster. And I said, okay. I was desperate. I said, pay me in American money because they're in Australia and pay me on time and let's see how it works out. And I figured I'd do that for a couple months and find a good job. And that was 9 years ago.
Wow.
9 years ago, I'm still working for Mysterious Universe is the name of the company, the website. I'm the editor, the head writer. I've added a lot of writers come and go. We're still banging away. So I've said this to Karen. I've had more notoriety in writing in the paranormal world than I ever had in the comedy world, which really shocked me. I had no idea how it's a tight knit community, and I'm a big fish in a really little pond as far as the paranormal world goes. But that's kind of how Karen and I got together because I was looking to expand into the paranormal world, and I had this idea for a paranormal podcast. And again, I'm waiting in line for Chinese food. I'm bored. I grab the business cards on the counter. I see this thing for podcasting. Next thing I know, I'm sitting in Karen's office with her and her son and talking about a paranormal podcast, and the rest is history.
And yesterday we announced that we have 232 podcasts of What in the World that are still available for people to go back and listen to. However, everybody, there's about 200 that are missing because we changed our format on how we were recording. And the original company that we were recording through, when we went to cancel, they just deleted everything. So now we save everything we record on top of posting it. And
Right.
The fun part about your show, Paul, is that it's not just paranormal, but there's a lot of paranormal. But there's little things that are happening in the real world. And when you talk about them, I know that myself and your sidekick, John Dinallo, we roll our eyes because it's like, do people really do those things? Do they eat those foods? Do they go to those places? Do women really marry a ghost?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. there's documentation out there. And it's a great, I think we're doing a great service with it because we're living in a very strange world right now. And
Yeah.
everything is, I won't say it's all bad news, but there's lots of bad news, starting with the weather,
Yeah.
going, to politics. And it's like, we don't talk about those things, at
Yeah.
least not in the everyday terminology. I know when my son and I met with you, um, we became a little excited when you brought up that you wrote for Jay Leno. But
Yeah.
it's over the years that I've learned about others that you've written for. And I can't think of his name now, from the Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, Don Knotts.
Don
Yeah.
Knotts is,
Actually, Don Knotts' daughter. Yeah.
yes. And I follow her now on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you brought a part of my history to me when you mentioned that you had been writing for her. And then
Oh,
I
yeah.
looked her up, and it's just heartwarming to know that there's all these connections that we can make. So you have a new book out, and a new book that I think a lot of people will find interesting, especially the title. Tell us about your newest book.
Well, can I hold it up?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah, sure. I'll hold it up while I type. So the title is "What Would You Say to a Naked Space Alien?" Um, and it's so to give you a little bit of background, it's not a dirty book. Okay, number one, it's not a dirty book. It's a collection of my favorite stories about people who have had and have said they've had encounters with space aliens. A flying saucer or some sort of craft lands near them, and beings come out, and the they converse, or they do something, and the beings get back in and they fly off. And this is many of the stories that you hear in the paranormal world, in the UFO world, are bad, as Karen was saying. They're bad news stories that people get abducted. The famous probing. They were probed. And I was enthusiastic when I started getting all of these more interesting, more oddball, more funny stories, like the guy who, a farmer who had a flying saucer land on his farm, and the beings came out, and he smelled something. Oh, they asked him for water. They asked him for water. So he gave him a bucket of water. They must have been, I think they were telepathic. They go back in this ship. They come back out a few minutes later with a plate of hot waffles. Hot waffles. what what great aliens these are. So he takes them, and he eats them. He actually eats them, and then they fly off again. They don't ask him for any money or anything. They just fly off. Don't leave him the recipe or anything like that. Uh, so he gave them to NASA. He kept one. He gave them to NASA, and NASA analyzed them and said, "Well, you could have made these yourself. We don't know what these are." But so that pretty much the end of the story. So being the comedy writer, I present that on Mysterious Universe as a straight alien encounter story. Being a comedy writer, I'm thinking this is really funny. Um, and the angle that I thought of was, what would I do if the same thing happened to me? The flying saucer lands, and the aliens come out and they give me waffles or pancakes, or my whatever my favorite breakfast might be. What would I say? And me, the first thing I'd say is, "Where's the eggs? Don't you have maple syrup on your planet?" Or so the story that became the title it turned out it was a love story about a man. He was a teenager at the time, 17 years old, lived in Georgia, also on a farm. Flying saucer land opens up, a female alien comes out. The way he described her, very shapely, very human body, but one of those big alien heads. And um, he felt a connection with her, and she she must have felt a connection with him as well because she proceeded to take off her clothes, hence the naked alien part. And it was such a connection that the two of them united. Let's use that term.
Okay.
With the end result being they had 50 children between them, alien human children. Um, so he wanted, he was a good father, they stayed with him on the farm. He went up on the ship. He went to their home planet. He wanted to share this story with his friends and with the world. There's good aliens. They've contacted me, and the alien, the head, his wife said, "No, we can't allow you to tell anybody." He wanted to take pictures. We can't allow you to take pictures. For one thing, they're naked. The women were, the men, the males were not, which was probably a good thing. So he said, "Well, I'm a painter. Could I paint them?" And they said, "Yeah, yeah, you could paint us." So he paints these beautiful pictures of the naked alien. So some of them doing compromising things. They're not exactly I would call them erotic
Okay.
photographs, but I mean, erotic paintings. And he takes them to UFO conferences, and he says, "Look at this. This is my life." And they just laugh him out the door. They That's even too absurd for the UFO people to buy. So he was desperate, and he approached a documentary film company and sold them on the idea of doing a documentary on him. And that's how I found out about him. This was around 2016. The documentary came out. I happened to see an announcement. I watched the documentary and I thought this is an interesting story. So I wrote about it on Mysterious Universe. And I told basically the straight story of another interesting alien encounter. Um, and his people contacted me, the documentary people. They thanked me for a nice interview because everybody else was making fun of him. And I said, "Well, that's not what I do for Mysterious Universe, but someday I'd like to add a little humor to this story because I think it's a really cool, but also a very funny story." And they said that'd be okay, just don't make fun of anybody. So again, when I came up with the idea of what would I do in a situation like this, the naked alien story was perfect. What would I do if a naked female alien landed in my backyard? I mean, the first thing I would do is look to see if my wife was watching. Uh, and then I thought, well, it depends on what age I am. I mean, if I'm my current age, I first thing I would say is, is your mom on board, grandmother, and does she look like you? Um, and then I thought, if I'm 17, boy, I'm trucking up there like in the cartoons with a cloud of dust behind me. Take me to your planet. So that became, I added all my little thoughts, and I challenged the reader of the book to put yourself in that position. What would you do if you encountered a naked space alien? So the waffle guy is real. There was one in Poland. For our Cleveland, for Cleveland, this is a beautiful story. The, they were shaped like the aliens were shaped like beer barrels, eggs, and they only had one leg. So he said that this guy said they would hop around on one leg, like on a pogo stick. And I thought, what would I say? The first thing I'd ask is, how do you put your pants on in the morning?
Yeah.
Um, and I'd offer to let them lean against the building, while we talk, so they don't fall over. Uh, and then there was the other one that I used to illustrate being from Cleveland. Um, Flying saucer opened up, a female alien came out, and the human heard some music coming out of the flying saucer, and he recognized the music, but he couldn't believe it. So he asked her, he says, "What is that music coming out of your flying saucer?" And she says, "Oh, that's the polka." when the polka is the national music of our planet, the
Oh, I love
planetary.
it.
Yeah, yeah, like polkas. And the worst thing from being from Cleveland, the worst thing is they don't have alcohol on their planet. So how can you have polkas with no beer? So obviously, that's why that must be why they came to Cleveland. They must have heard that there's something that goes with polkas, and it's in Cleveland, Ohio. So we can get both of them there while we're visiting.
I
Uh,
love it.
yeah, so it's a fun book. I have some stories about rock stars. John Lennon has saw aliens. Keith Richard, and the thing I like about that is that all of these rock stars, the first thing you would say and I would say is, well, they were obviously stoned, and every single one of them knows that that's what we're thinking. So they all preface their story with, "I did no drugs that day. I was not drunk. Um, this is a real story." And it, Jimi Hendrix, some current ones, Miley Cyrus has seen aliens and flying saucers. So I think there's a connection. To that as well. If there's any aliens listening, we got the rock. Not only do we have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, but we also have the Polka Hall of Fame. So if you're from that planet with the polka music, come visit
Come
both.
visit. Absolutely. Well, and as some of you are listening to Paul, and I love hearing his stories, and we get lots of those on What in the World. Um, you may be saying to yourself, well, why did you choose Paul? Because the name of your show is Your Purpose, Your Power, Your Journey to Authenticity. He is authentic. He has found his purpose and he has that power. You draw us in. And, you know, we have a number of shows here in New Cleveland Radio, but Tuesday afternoons, unless I have a terrible migraine or unless John has to be at the polls because, he's one of those election participants, which we love
Right.
that he does. Other than that, every Tuesday at 3:30, three old fogies get on What in the World.
That's right. And we have fun. I always say at the end, I hope that our listeners have as much fun listening as we do putting the show on. And I know I've gotten a chance, and as well as Karen, we've gotten a chance to meet um, many of our listeners, and they do. That's what they tell us. That's the reason why we listen. You don't get this kind of strange news anyplace else, and it's good strange. That's what I like to describe it that way. It's okay to be strange. Um, I learned that in the in the comedy business because really, that's a hard job. That's not something that you can really prepare for or that you think you might be born into. It's a strange way of making a living, and yet, many people do it. They enjoy it. They love it. It's a it doesn't seem to be healthy. Working in smoky comedy clubs that are basically bars with comedy, and yet, think about it. Bob Hope lived to be 100. George Burns lived to be 100. Mel Brooks is 99. Dick Van Dyke is 99. Carl Reiner was 97 before he passed away. So there's longevity and there's health. The famous book "Laughter is the Best Medicine." He
Yep.
was right, Dr. Norman Cousin. He was right. I used to talk about that. I used to give talks at businesses about using humor in business. The um, podcasting kind of brought back what one of the messages I would say, because I used to talk to people who were on the phone, maybe doing a help desk or something like that. And I said, we can hear your smile. If you're smiling when you're talking to us, we know it. And if you're selling something, we're more open to it. If you're trying to help us or trying, it's a hard job to try and
Right.
figure out why somebody's computer's not working. But if you sound like, you're willing to help, you're in a good mood, willing to help, it's easier for us to explain what the problem might be. So, I mean, I would tell people to have joke books, have a mirror in front of you so you could see that you're smiling, all those things. It's it's good for your business, it's good for your health, good for your psyche, good for your marriage, um, all those things, you know. So yeah, so there's been a running theme throughout all the different careers that I have had, and that is humor. And I hope that humor is going to help me live a few more years because I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. But as I've said many times, I I fully expect something weird to present itself to me at some point. And it just might be my next career, my next you know, after my fourth or fifth midlife crisis.
So I do have a question for you
Oh, sure.
because we're going through some big changes in comedy right now. So I know we don't really do any kind of political satire, although occasionally I throw something in, and both you and John put your hands up like, no, we're not going to talk about that. But late night comedy brought a lot of people together. Now we see that late night comedy is in jeopardy, at least in the way that most people can get it.
Yeah.
And you know, my my thought is if I don't like when somebody is saying, whether it's a comic or a news person, doesn't make any difference. If I don't like it, I know how to turn the channel off. I know
Hmm.
how to walk away from it. I also know how to double check the facts to see if the information is right. But when it's comedy, you have choices. Do you think it's going to hurt you going forward? I mean, you're not writing for anybody big right now, but if somebody big came along and wanted you to write for them, how how careful would you have to be?
Wow. You know, I've thought about if I were 20 or 30, I'd say 30, the really the perfect age to get into writing for Hollywood or writing for any of these shows, no matter where they're headquartered. Would I do it? Because I have always wanted to write about more than just politics, even though I spent 7 years working for a magazine called Slick Times during the Bill Clinton administration, and it was all political humor. But we hit both sides. It didn't matter who they did that Bill Clinton was the president. We also picked on all of the other politicians on both sides during that time period. So you know, I'm an equal opportunity offender, is what we like to say in the comedy business. That so you really asked a two-part question. So on the the fate of late night comedy, um, unfortunately, I think that um, the expansion of news to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, changed television for us,
Yeah,
and it exposed more people to news that they hadn't thought about before. Um, you know, when we were growing up, there was 1 hour of news on at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather or whoever it might be, and then there was a little bit of news at 11 o'clock before the Tonight Show came on, and
right.
that was it. That was it. And you read the newspaper, and the newspaper is a very um, it's a much richer way of absorbing the news than television because television just blasted at you. You don't have any choices, and that's a big one right there. You can't say I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about this and tell the person who's talking. With the newspaper, I can go from the front page to the sports to the editorial to lifestyle to the comics. I make the decision
Right.
and I pick what I want. So you kind of hinted to that with, well, I can change the channel. But with news, that it's still the same news on every station. So that affected late night television. I think that uh, when Jay Leno didn't do it. David Letterman didn't do it. Even Conan O'Brien didn't do it. But the next generation was getting the message that we have to talk more about what everybody's talking about, and that's who the president is, or what the Congress is doing. And I don't like, I love the late night. I watch all the shows. I worked for a number of conservative comedians over the years. I've worked for conservative radio shows over the years. It doesn't bother me. Funny is funny. Funny is funny as long as it's not hurting anybody. That's the rule right there. I find that some of the really I don't want to say some of the comedy is a little bit hurtful.
Right.
I think it's more we're looking at it and it's not comedy anymore. We're looking at it for the news. The Daily Show kind of became a news show for people. They learned about things on it. I learn about things on the Daily Show to this day. So the line between comedy and news presentation got blurred. It really got blurred, and politicians and comedians and people on television take advantage of that. When you hear someone say, "Oh, can't you take a joke?" after they said something that offended you, and they're wanting you to think, I'm a politician, but I want you to think that I was a comedian, or vice versa. So that has, I don't know how we get back to something else. And then the world has changed. We had we didn't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week back in the old days. We came home, we watched afternoon talk shows. Moms stayed at home. They watched morning talk shows. That's where they learned about Hollywood stars. And it was a family. Back in the old days, I was thinking of Merv Griffin. So Merv Griffin is a good example. He was a singer. He was an actor in Hollywood. The people he brought on his show were his friends, his singing friends, his acting friends. When Steve Allen and Johnny Carson were in New York, that's who they brought on their show. And we didn't see those people anyplace else. You saw them in the movies, and if you didn't, and that was it. Now we have how many different TV news channels, 24/7, tons of them. So you don't have to go to the Tonight Show or to late night and hear more interviews with them. And they're not their friends anymore. They're just an interview. It's somebody plugging their show. Back then it was a cocktail party. I've read this many times. Steve Allen especially wanted his show to be a late night cocktail party. So that's why it was live. They wore suits. People dressed up to go to the show. I mean, I've been in audiences of late night shows, and people are in shorts, flip flops, tank tops. It's so that colors how you receive the comedy, and also how us at home see it. Well, it just is casual stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well,
it's a hard.
Yeah. You answered it in the way that I was sort of hoping to hear, that we are evolving so quickly, and everybody wants something that means something to them. And so I think sometimes it's very difficult for the writers, for those who are delivering the comedy, to really give everybody what they want. I just remember growing up, and I'm going to sort of close on this. My father would come home, we'd have dinner, he'd watch the news, and then he would sort of take a nap until about 11 o'clock when he'd get up and watch the news, and then stay up for the Tonight Show. And then he'd go to bed, but he had to get up at 5:30 in the morning.
Right.
And I asked somebody else the other day, I like, did your parents stay up and watch the Tonight Show? Oh, yeah. But almost the same scenario. They would be sitting on the couch, they'd take a nap, they'd wake up alert at 11 o'clock
Yep,
and
yep,
go on for the rest of the evening. You're right. Most of these shows are streaming. So if we miss it at late night, we can
right.
see it the next day whenever we want. But comedy really is, for me, um, something that makes me heal. And I've shared this before. 13 years ago, I went through a pretty bad depression. My husband dragged me to the comedy club once a week.
Hmm.
And we couldn't afford it back then because I had to give up my job.
Yeah.
And the first couple times I was angry with him. I sat there pouting. I didn't want to laugh, but every once in a while I'd snicker. And by the third week, it was like, I have to go to the comedy club because I'm going to be happy. And some of the comedy can be raunchy, some of it can be just playful, but you get to pick and choose. And that's the nice
Yeah.
part about living in our society. The same way you all can pick and choose to watch What in the World with Paul Seaburn. We are live recording on Tuesdays at 3:30, and you can stream us at any time. And I'm sure Paul will have some good stories to tell next week on What in the World.
I'm already working on them. That's right.
I love it. Well, thank you for joining me on
Oh,
Cleveland 13 News.
thank you. It was a lot of fun as always. Everything you're involved with, Karen, I'm always excited about it. And you've introduced me to 13. I've been visiting the website and looking at all of the different things and picking up local news. So it's already turned into a good resource for me as well. Emphasizing my point again, you never know what or when something is going to pop up in front of you that maybe doesn't change your life, but changes your direction a little bit and for the better. So again, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
Yeah. Bye bye.